This podcast will serve as an introduction to quantitative data analysis. We will focus on dataset construction in this short podcast. We'll have several learning outcomes throughout this module in the various podcasts. We will first focus on being able to read information from a dataset, and then we will describe a variable's measures of central tendency and variability. We'll then interpret a confidence interval, a scatter plot, a line graph, and a regression table in a research article. And overall, we'll explain how different research designs influence the conclusions we can make in social science research. We'll start with dataset construction. When we collect large N primary data, a computer program either will insert the information into a dataset for you, or you will enter in the data yourself. In my career as a social scientist, I've done both. Large N refers to a large number of cases. There are many computer programs that we can use to store and analyze data. Excel is one that comes with Microsoft and is used frequently. So is SPSS, Statistical Programming for the Social Sciences. SAS, Statistical Analysis Software, Stata, and R are slightly less commonly used, although Stata and R are kind of more modern types of programs. R is open source, so we have to often construct our own routines to be able to analyze data, but it's relatively popular. Stata is used fairly frequently by professional political scientists. In other words, there are choices that we have in terms of computer programs. In POLS 301, the second of this two-course research method sequence, we will use SPSS. How do we read a data set? So imagine a spreadsheet with columns, rows, and cells. The first column on the far left should be the unit of analysis, which can be an individual, can be a group or a grouping, such as a region, a city, a state, a country, or time, if we have a time series data set. Columns to the right will be the variable names. The rows themselves are observations for each case. The cells include the data for each variable for each observation or each case. Codebooks are text files, usually in Word or PDF, but sometimes in .txt files that explain how each variable is measured. Some codebooks can be quite elaborate. So if we look at a data set hypothetically, you can see on the far left the column is headed by unit, states, countries, individuals, or time. Observation 1, Observation 2, and Observation 3 tell us that there are 3 observations in this hypothetical data set, or an N of 3. Right next to the unit is the time collected, year or specific date. So the date the Observation 1 was collected, Observation 2, and Observation 3. Keeping in mind that if we have a time series data set, then this column is subsumed by unit because the unit will become simply a time point. The dependent variable, of course, is what you're interested in trying to explain in terms of its variation, and we have data for each observation organized in this manner. The independent variable is the key causal effect on the dependent variable, and we have data for each observation. And then to the right of the independent variable are other types of variables, such as control variables, and data for each of those observations for that variable. So the idea is to collect as much information as we can about these cases, and then subject them to hypothesis testing and analytic procedures. Here's a sample data set where we have 3 observations. We have the date surveyed, October 10th, 2022, and from the code book, we're looking at a variable called satisfaction with democracy. So for the satisfaction with democracy variable, respondents were asked the following question: how satisfied are you with how democracy works in your country in 2022? So the options are fairly limited: satisfied, unsatisfied, or no response. So you can see that the 3 respondents had 3 different reactions to the question about were they satisfied with democracy. One was satisfied, respondent 1, one was unsatisfied, respondent 2, and respondent 3 gave no response at all. Keep in mind that in surveys, nobody compels the respondent to answer every single question, so you can often get no response or missing data. The independent variable in this hypothetical situation that we're using to try to explain variation in satisfaction with democracy is called party identification. Democrats, Republicans, Independents in the United States, those are the keys for party identification. And the respondents have given also 3 different answers in terms of party identification. The level of education is a type of control variable. So we'd want to control for the level of education. And we can see that there's variation across the respondents in terms of their levels of education. So this is how a data set, quantitative data set, is organized. In the next podcast, we'll move on to descriptive statistics.